Alright, what's up guys? My name is Zach and today I am driving a 2004 Saturn Ion 3. Up front is a 2.2 liter inline 4 and down below is a CVT. Yes, you heard me correctly. Now I am super excited to be driving this here Ion for two main reasons. First of all, you don't see many Saturns anymore. I've only ever reviewed here on the channel one Saturn. In over 1,000 vehicles, only one Saturn. So now today, we are going to double the amount of Saturn videos I have. The second reason is the fact that it has that CVT, and we'll talk about that when we talk about the drivetrain. But before we get on to anything else, I have a website, zachpareto.com, where you can buy stickers and other merchandise when it becomes available. You could also submit your own vehicle to be reviewed by me through a quick and easy submission form, and you get a video of your car just like this one. And you could read my behind-the-scenes blog to see what I'm filming before it comes out on the channel. But let's get back to that 2.2 liter Ecotec under the hood. Well, it's shared with a couple of other vehicles from this era, the Chevy Cobalt, the Chevy Cavalier in the end of its life, and vehicles of that nature, which it makes sense. This car shares a platform with the Cobalt, HHR, and Pontiac G5. It only makes about 140 horsepower, which is fine. I'm not really asking much of the Ion. It was just a car to get around from point A to point B. Saturn was always marketed to those who didn't really need or want all the bells and whistles, so it's perfectly fine in this application. But like I said, paired to it is a CVT. So the CVT was only offered in 2003 and 2004 in the Saturn Ion, where they actually backtracked and went back to offering a traditional automatic transmission for the rest of this model run to 2007. GM was experimenting with CVTs in the early 2000s. And funny enough, some modern GMs use CVTs, but this was one of the first vehicles that they sold with it. Driving it around town, it's fine. The CVT doesn't bother me. I don't even really notice it. However, luckily this vehicle was really well taken care of and still has the owner's manual and a letter from Saturn themselves saying, hey, you might have trouble with your transmission. Don't worry, we have you covered for 5 years or 75,000 miles. And that's in that letter here. If you want to pause the video, I'll put the full letter. So if you want to read everything that they said, here it is. But I just find it so fascinating that Saturn actually did a CVT. I always associate CVTs with the later 2000s into the 2010s, and now they're pretty standard place across the board. But back in the day, they weren't. I think that's really, really cool. Last but not least about the drivetrain, of course, the Saturn Ion is front-wheel drive. And so how does it drive? How does it feel to drive the Ion? It's fine. It drives a lot like a Cobalt or any of its other chassis mates. It's not anything too crazy. It's not knocking my socks off. Definitely feels very economy, but exactly what I would expect out of a car like this. So par for the course. With that stuff out of the way, let's talk about the interior. Well, in front of me, I don't actually have anything. I do get the steering wheel, which looks comically large, has this big pillowy airbag that you've come to know and love from the 2000s and late 90s. The grips are really down low, which is kind of interesting. Kind of gives it a much more laid back driving experience. And then I get my cruise control options, power on the left and speed off to the right. That's it. This is an Ion level 3. That was the trim level. So there was level 1, level 2, and level 3, as well as the red line was sort of the top tier. And so this being the level 3, it did get some features that other Ions didn't, like power windows, power locks, and a nicer radio, which has since been removed, but we'll talk about that later on. Off to the left of the steering wheel, I do have a climate control vent, little cubby to place whatever I want, and my fog light switch. And then down below, I do also get an extra little coin holder, which I think is pretty nice. Moving on to the door, I have those power locks we mentioned with the level 3, power mirrors, and power windows, of which the driver's window is actually automatic down. Moving into the center, this is where you find the gauge cluster. Now it is angled towards the driver, which is very, very nice, but kind of weird that they did this. Off to the left is my coolant temperature and fuel, center is my speed, and off to the right is my tachometer. The only other vehicles in this era I can think of that did it was the Yaris and the Toyota Echo. So I guess it was a little bit more normal for this era, but still very weird to see. Down below that, I get my hazard switch and this nice Ion badge. I kind of find it interesting that Saturn went out of their way to add this Ion badge when everything else is so bare bones and basic. But then I do have an aftermarket radio. This is not the factory radio that came in the Ion back in 2004. And like I said, the level 3 would have gotten an upgrade, but this is not that. Then we have the climate controls, where to set it off to the left, fan speed in the center, temperature off to the right. Very, very simple. Then we do get what looks like it would be a cubby, but it's actually not. It's just blocked off, which is kind of irritating. And then we do have cup holders. So we will do a big friggin' bottle test here in the Saturn Ion 3. And unfortunately, it does not fit. Although you do get two different sized cup holders, the one on the left being smaller than the one on the right, it still does not pass. The bottle barely goes inside. And once you take a turn, it's gonna be the end of your day. So unfortunately, the Saturn Ion fails the big friggin' bottle test. Then we have the shifter. Shifter's pretty normal, although it is controlling that CVT. It doesn't look special, although it does have the I. You can put it down into I. Then down below that, we have the handbrake and 12-volt outlet. And then we have this tiny little center console to rest your arm on, but nothing more than that. Then we have the seats. The seats are decently comfortable. They are decently bolstered. And honestly, I find them well suited here in the Ion. I don't have any complaints. I do have a complaint, though, about the seatbelt. Cut to the in-car footage. The seatbelt is mounted to the ceiling up over my shoulder, and I don't think I can adjust it. So I'm 5'11". I might not have a head at the end of this video because it is sawing into my neck, and it is very, very uncomfortable. I almost feel like I'm in a neck brace. All right, so I later found out that there are supposed to be little things that connect the seatbelt to the seat so it doesn't rub on your neck. However, they both broke in this particular car, and they are very easily breakable. So if you plan on buying an Ion, it might be an issue you might want to address. However, speaking of seats, we do have back seats, so let's go do a back seat review. All right, so we're in the back of the 2004 Saturn Ion Quad Coupe. We'll talk about that when we talk about the exterior. But the back seats, I sort of fit in. My head is hitting the ceiling. My knees have to split in order to accommodate the seat. It's not a very pleasurable backseat experience. However, I am in the back, and honestly, going to the store, going to the movies, I wouldn't throw too much of a fit being back here. Now, interestingly enough, I do get a charger port, a 12-volt outlet back here for the rear seat occupants, very nice. And I do get this center tray with two cup holders and some storage areas, which is interesting. However, I guess with it being so small, they weren't gonna try to jam a third seat back here, so I guess it makes sense. But overall, not a very pleasurable experience. If you're gonna drive people around a lot, get the 4-door, be done with it. But the fact that this is sort of a 2-door, 4-door coupe is kind of cool. But let's hop around back. We'll take a quick look at the trunk and cargo space, and then we'll talk about the looks. Well, this is, hold on. This is kind of dangerous. I can't reach the handle to open this door back up, and I don't have a way to put this seat down. Oh boy, I can feel the handle. I just can't get leverage on it. There it is. Holy crap. I had to push it with the back of my hand. Not the best design, I tell you that much. All right, let's look at the cargo space. All right, so we're on the back of the Saturn Ion. I do have a trunk popper here on the key fob. It's worn out, but it's that little circle. Pull it up here, and then we honestly do have a bunch of space. What's really, really nice is that you do get these levers to unhook the back seats to let them down. And then I would notice this when I did the back seat review, as you'll look here. So these seats can then be pulled down, access them through the trunk. But then this also has like a protective cover on the back that seat doesn't. So in theory, you can put that one down too for more storage. Really, really brilliant design here from Saturn. In terms of trunk and cargo space, really, really lots of space to love back here in the back of the Ion. Now we gotta talk about the looks, and the first thing I wanna talk about before we do a walk around are the doors. This is known as the Quad Coupe. So it looks like it just has two doors, but it actually has these little rear hinge doors at the back, much like a Mazda RX-8 later on. This looks incredibly cool. Are they functional? Not really. In terms of practicality, I would much rather have a regular sedan, but definitely cool. So let's do a walk around. I like the look of the Ion. This particular car only has 83,000 miles on it, so it is a really, really clean example, and I just love looking at that. I love seeing the Saturn badges, and I love the fact that it's not just a blatant rebadge of a different Chevy product. It's not a Cobalt with a different name up at the front. It actually looks different. Although it shares a platform and shares some parts, the Cobalt didn't have its gate gauges in the center. The Cobalt didn't have these weird rear hinge doors, so I like the uniqueness of it, and that to me makes the Saturn Ion feel special. However, that being said, let's get on to my final thoughts. What do I think finally driving a Saturn Ion and finally driving a second Saturn? By the way, before we get on to my final thoughts, if you have a Saturn for me to review, the closer to Chicago, the better, but I travel all over the country, please let me know. I want to film more Saturns, especially if it's a Redline or Saturn Sky or a right-hand drive postal Saturn, anything cool, interesting, or just any Saturn at all. Please email me or contact me with the information up on the screen. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let's get on to my final thoughts. As a car, the Saturn Ion is fine. In the way it drives and the way it feels, it doesn't really blow me out of the water. It's an economy car that was meant to be purchased either by college students or young adults that didn't have all the cash to buy nicer vehicles. Saturn filled that gap, and they actually recruited a lot of their sales team from college campuses. Saturn was known to go to college campuses and say, hey, you want a sales position right now? And so they did it, and they did produce unique economy vehicles. However, when the financial crisis hit in 2008, GM canceled Saturn pretty much right away, along with Pontiac and Saab and some other smaller brands. But for some reason, Saturn feels the saddest. For some reason, saying goodbye to Oldsmobile and Pontiac and Saab were sad, of course. They were great brands too. But there's something that's more heart-wrenching about Saturn, and I think it's the fact that they were cut so early. Saturn was technically founded in the 1980s, 1985, but they didn't actually produce a vehicle under the Saturn name until the 1990s. So when they were finally cut, they were still a teenage company. And I think the sadness is brought on by the fact that they were producing unique vehicles that had somewhat of a personality. GM was known for rebadging their cars. And I'm not saying that the Ion is without rebadge sin, but it felt different. Then pair that with the fact that the company had made cars for under 20 years, it starts to make me feel like this car was a part of the 27 Club, a grouping of celebrities that passed away all when they were 27. I imagine if you dug into the plant in which these were built down in Spring Hill, Tennessee, you might find an all-white lighter under the floorboards. However, maybe there's a silver lining. Maybe Saturn folded before modern GM that rebadges everything they can get their hands on. Maybe Saturn would have slid into the norm, and quite possibly that might be a worse fate. And there were hints at that because one of the last Saturns made, the car that replaced this, was the Saturn Astra, which was a complete rebadge of the Opel Astra sold overseas. So while this car company wasn't around for a long time, they were around for a good time. This is a good, solid car. The owner has had two of them. When one was crashed in an accident, he went out and found another one. While yes, his first Ion was originally purchased just as a vehicle to get around in, he fell in love with it. And honestly, I might be falling too. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you guys enjoyed looking at a clean running example of a Saturn Ion. I don't know if I'll ever get this opportunity ever again to drive something like this in such good condition. With each passing day, there's fewer and fewer Saturns on the road. And so just for a moment, just for however long this video was, I hope you enjoyed seeing one. It might not happen again anytime soon. Huge thank you to Hayden for letting me take out his Saturn Ion, and of course his brother Alan for setting it up. This was such a cool experience. I was so happy to drive another Saturn. Hayden and Alan are awesome, really down-to-earth guys, and I can't wait to see what they pick up next. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to rate the video, comment on the video, and subscribe if you really liked it. Take care, guys.